When you picture the ancient Silk Roads, what is the very first thing that pops into your head?
Oh, well, usually it's, the classic imagery.
Right. You are probably imagining these vast sun-baked deserts, right? Lines of camels, heavily laden with shimmering silk, maybe leather pouches overflowing with exotic spices, or heavy wooden chests of gold.
Yeah, it's a very romantic image.
It is. It's this incredibly romantic image of rugged merchants trading luxury goods across continents. But well, the source material we are diving into today, an excerpt from Peter Frankopan's brilliant history, The Silk Roads, it basically pulls the rug right out from under that image.
It really does,
Yeah.
because it turns out that the most powerful, world-shaping commodities traded along those ancient routes weren't physical goods at all.
No, they were ideas, specifically gods and faiths.
And it is important to realize right up front that these weren't, just polite philosophical debates shared over a campfire. In antiquity, the intellectual and theological spaces were absolutely ruthless. You had local cults, ancient pantheons, and new philosophies constantly jostling for market share.
Exactly. And that is our mission for this deep dive. We're going to unpack how the world's major religions didn't just spread through peaceful persuasion. They were adapted, commercialized, and completely weaponized by ancient empires.
Yeah, weaponized is the perfect word for it.
I mean, think of the Silk Roads as the ancient version of the internet. But instead of routing data, it routed human survival. It was a crowded, incredibly noisy marketplace of ideas. And just like today, if an idea wanted to achieve massive network effects, if it wanted to go viral and spread across the known world, it had to adapt to the underlying architecture of the time.
Which back then meant appealing to merchants, kings, and, well, their wallets.
Right. It was built on merchant wealth, royal patronage, and military force.
What's fascinating here is how the source material explicitly shows these belief systems being forced to evolve to survive, like competing startups almost.
Wow.
There was this underlying, incredibly powerful equation driving everything in the ancient world. Basically, a society protected by the right god thrived, while those worshipping false idols suffered famine, plague, or conquest.
It was very high stakes.
Incredibly high. So as you listen today, pay attention to the mechanisms of how this actually worked. Faith, politics, and money became completely inseparable because rulers and merchants quickly realized that investing in the right spiritual infrastructure was the ultimate tool for control.
So, if religion really was this competitive marketplace, how did a faith actually win over its consumers?
Well, that's the big question.
Right. I mean, how did a belief system go from a local niche to a global powerhouse? Let's trace the journey of Buddhism, because to capture the Silk Road demographic, it underwent what has to be one of the most radical transformations in human history.
Oh, absolutely.
Early Buddhism, in its most traditional form in northern India, was this intense, solitary metaphysical journey. The goal was to escape suffering by following the 8 Noble Paths.
It was a very internal journey.
Exactly. You didn't need grand physical trappings. You didn't need a priestly middleman. You just needed to detach completely from the material world.
But, isolation doesn't scale.
Right.
As Buddhism began to move out of northern India and along these vital trade routes, it faced a serious logistical problem. It was competing in an increasingly noisy religious environment. To survive, it had to become visible.
It needed good marketing.
Basically, yeah. It had to offer something tangible to people who were living very dangerous, highly material lives. So we see this incredible shift. Suddenly, massive physical stupas and shrines ostensibly linked to the Buddha are constructed.
Becoming these massive, highly visible points of pilgrimage.
Right, and the texts themselves evolved. You have the emergence of documents like the Lotus Sutra during this period, which fundamentally changed the rules of spiritual embedment.
How so?
Well, suddenly, salvation wasn't just about silent meditation. You could achieve a higher state of consciousness by bringing perfumes to a shrine. You could literally attain Buddhahood by hiring musicians to beat drums, blow conches, and play lutes.
Okay, let's unpack this. Wait, so a religion built fundamentally on letting go of material possessions suddenly turns around and says the path to enlightenment includes donating precious gems.
Yes.
Because the texts literally listed acceptable gifts, right? Pearls, crystal, gold, silver, lapis lazuli, diamonds.
They sure did.
I'm sorry, but it sounds like they invented the ultimate ancient carbon offset.
A carbon offset.
You commit a bunch of sins as a cutthroat merchant, but you just pay for a monastery and cleanse your spiritual ledger.
It's a great analogy, actually, but the motivation was even more practical than just wiping a spiritual slate clean.
Really?
Yeah, this new concept of endowment, the idea that donating wealth would literally carry you over the oceans of suffering, was the economic engine that funded massive, sprawling monastic centers.
Oh, I see.
And we have to look at how these centers function. Imagine you are a Sogdian merchant. The Sogdians were an ancient Iranian civilization that essentially acted as the ultimate middlemen of the Silk Roads.
They dominated the long-distance trade.
Exactly. So you are thousands of miles from home, carrying a fortune in goods across hostile territory. You need a dependable chain of stopping points to survive. These new Buddhist monasteries weren't just quiet places of prayer. They functioned almost like ancient banking compounds.
So they provided physical security.
Security, translation services, and crucial credit networks. As the Sogdian merchants converted to Buddhism, they funded stupas along their routes.
Wow.
You can actually see their names carved into rocks alongside images of the Buddha in northern Pakistan today. The monks provided the literacy and the neutral ground needed to draft contracts and store wealth safely.
So it was a mutual benefit.
Completely. The merchants funded the monks, and the monks provided the infrastructure for global trade.
That completely changes the picture.
Yeah.
I mean, seeking a little spiritual comfort makes sense, but seeking a fortified vault and a bilingual accountant when you're thousands of miles from home with all your wealth strapped to a camel, that makes even more sense.
It was highly practical.
And the sheer scale of the wealth pouring in was staggering. The text notes that Kabul was ringed with 40 monasteries.
40.
Yeah. One later visitor described a monastery there with a pavement made of onyx, walls of pure marble, a door of molded gold, a solid silver floor, and a golden idol seated on a bejeweled throne. Commerce quite literally financed the spread of the faith.
It did. But, merchant wealth alone has a ceiling.
Right.
A merchant can build a spectacular local temple, but to truly lock in dominance across the entirety of Eurasia, a faith needed something much more powerful than merchant cash.
Which is what?
It needed a standing army and state bureaucracy.
Oh, right. Which brings us to the next massive shift. When rulers realized this newly popular, incredibly wealthy religion was the ultimate political technology.
Exactly.
The Kushan Empire is the perfect case study here. In the first centuries AD, they controlled a massive swath of territory stretching from northern India across Central Asia. But they had a massive PR problem.
They were nomadic conquerors.
Right. They weren't native to the region. They desperately needed a way to justify their rule over millions of settled people who viewed them as foreign occupiers.
And military force is incredibly expensive to maintain if your population hates you.
Yeah, that drains the treasury fast.
So the Kushans were incredibly pragmatic. They didn't just passively adopt Buddhism, they forced its evolution to serve their administrative needs. They blended ideas from a whole range of cultural sources to create a theology that would appeal to the absolute maximum number of subjects.
Like finding the lowest common denominator.
Exactly. They sponsored lavish temples, known as temples of the divine family, which pushed the radical concept that the rulers themselves were the direct link between heaven and earth.
I noticed a really specific detail about this in the text. An earlier Bactrian king named Menander Bactria, being that fascinating Greco-Buddhist region left over from Alexander the Great's conquests.
Right.
He started putting both Greek and Indic scripts on his coins to declare himself a savior, and then the Kushans took that and ran with it.
They did.
There is an inscription found in the Punjab that literally calls the Kushan ruler Great King, King of Kings, and Son of God.
I have to ask, it feels like these kings were actively hacking the local theology.
Hacking it.
Yeah. I mean, Son of God, Savior, isn't this exactly the same branding we see later in the Old and New Testaments?
Well, I'd argue it's less about hacking a specific theology and more about recognizing a universal administrative necessity.
Okay, tell me more.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you can see why this strategy is so appealing to any ruling elite. What the Kushans were doing was establishing a leadership cult to solve a practical problem.
Which was staying in power.
Right. When a king claims a direct, exclusive gateway to the divine, it creates an unbreachable distance between the ruler and the subject. Think about it from the perspective of an average farmer.
Okay.
To question the king's tax policy or his draft for the army is no longer just a civic grievance. It is literally blasphemy against the universe itself.
Wow. Yeah, you can't argue with the universe. Religion had become the absolute, unassailable justification for total political authority.
So the Kushans showed how religion could validate a foreign ruler and keep the population in line. But if religion is that potent of a tool, what happens when it falls into the hands of an empire that wants to do more than just keep the peace?
Things get violent.
Yeah. What happens when a state weaponizes theology to forge a militaristic, hyper-aggressive identity?
We find out in 224 AD, just next door to the Kushans, the Sasanian dynasty violently overthrew the ruling regime in Persia.
A bloody takeover.
Very bloody. And to legitimize their sudden takeover, rulers like Arteries III and his son Shapur, deliberately tied their new regime to the glorious ancient past of the great Persian kings Darius and Cyrus.
But they didn't just build new statues to honor the past, right?
No, they completely overhauled the physical currency of the realm. For centuries, Persian coins had featured Greek script and busts styled on Alexander the Great. The Sasanians violently erased that legacy.
They minted new coins with a distinctive royal profile on one side.
And on the reverse, they stamped a blazing fire altar. To a largely illiterate population, this was a massive, unmistakable provocation. They were radically promoting Zoroastrianism at the expense of all other faiths.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The actual theology of Zoroaster matched the empire's military goals perfectly.
Oh, is a perfect fit.
The universe, according to this faith, is fundamentally divided. You have Ahura Mazda, which is illuminating wisdom, and Angra Mainyu, the hostile spirit.
It is a literal cosmic war.
Exactly. A universe locked in constant, agonizing conflict between goodness and demonic forces.
Yeah.
I mean, if your state religion demands a constant purifying struggle against evil forces, doesn't that just hand you a blank check to conquer your neighbors?
Pretty much.
If they aren't with you, they are literally agents of the hostile spirit.
It is the ultimate blank check for expansion, and the fallout was staggering. The Sasanian military machine was incredibly aggressive. We actually have inscriptions from the chief priest of the era, a man named Kirdir.
What did he say?
He openly bragged about his toil and trouble in establishing fire temples across newly conquered lands. But you have to read between the lines of his bragging.
Because it wasn't peaceful.
Not at all. This wasn't peaceful missionary work where priests were handing out pamphlets to curious locals. It was the violent suppression of rival cosmologies. You couldn't just have an alternative view of the universe under the Sasanians.
Right.
Jews, Buddhists, Hindus, and Manichaeans, the Manichaeans being followers of a major rival dualistic religion, they were severely persecuted. Their places of worship were ransacked, their idols were literally smashed to pieces, and their sanctuaries were forcibly converted into temples for the Zoroastrian gods.
So the state was essentially saying, our God brings cosmic order, your God is a literal demon causing chaos.
Precisely. Zoroastrianism became a tool of military occupation. It enforced state doctrine through brute force.
That's terrifying.
It is. But there is a massive historical irony here, a severe, unintended consequence to governing like this. When a state religion becomes entirely synonymous with a heavy-handed, oppressive military regime, the local populations don't just passively submit.
No, they resent it.
They become utterly desperate for an alternative faith. They need an ideological antidote to the Persian authorities.
And that desperation created the perfect vacuum for a new religion to absolutely explode in the East. A religion that, honestly, most of us falsely assume was entirely Western.
It's a huge misconception.
We usually associate the origins and early spread of Christianity with Rome, with the Pope, with Constantinople, or Canterbury. But the source material makes it abundantly, undeniably clear.
Early Christianity was deeply, fundamentally Asian.
It was born in Jerusalem. It was spoken in Aramaic, a Semitic language of the Near East. Its theological roots were Jewish, shaped in Israel, Egypt, and Babylon.
Just look at the parables.
Right. Think about the parables. They were about deserts, droughts, and famines. These are environments and anxieties that European populations living in rainy oak forests had absolutely no context for.
It is a massive historical blind spot. The reality is that early Christianity spread far more spectacularly and with far more promise in the East than it initially did across the Mediterranean.
Really?
Oh, yeah. It moved along the trade routes carried by merchants and Jewish exile communities deep into Mesopotamia. It reached the Caucasus Mountains. It reached the Persian Gulf.
Wow.
We actually have evidence of 60 coral-cut tombs near Bahrain dating back to the start of the 3rd century. And ironically, the Persian king Shapur accidentally supercharged this Eastern spread.
Wait, the guy who was stamping fire altars on coins.
The very same. When he militarily occupied Roman Syria, he deported thousands of Christians deep into Persian territory. He was trying to dilute their influence, but instead, he set up massive new bishoprics and sparked these huge cultural clashes that only strengthened the Christian communities in the East.
The contrast between how the East and the West handled early Christians is staggering to think about. While Christians are building vibrant communities and flourishing across the Persian Empire, the Romans are actively throwing them to the gladiators.
The Romans were completely baffled by them.
Yeah, you have Roman governors like Pliny the Younger writing letters to the emperor, basically saying, I have no idea what these Christians actually believe, but they are incredibly stubborn, so I just had them executed.
Just for being stubborn.
Exactly. The Roman military viewed their attitudes on life and death as a direct threat to martial values. It is incredible to realize that the East, even under the heavy hand of Persian Zoroastrianism, was actually the safer haven for this faith.
It was.
That is, until one specific Roman emperor flipped the script entirely and doomed them all.
Yes, the turning point of the entire era. The question is, how did Christianity become synonymous with Europe, and what happened to that thriving Asian Christian church?
It all comes down to a single geopolitical maneuver that backfired in the most spectacular way imaginable.
We are talking about Constantine.
The year is 312 AD, the Battle of the Milvian Bridge. Constantine is fighting a brutal civil war for control of the Roman Empire. He supposedly looks up into the sky, sees a cross of light, and hears the words, "By this sign you will conquer."
A legendary moment.
Right. He wins the battle, converts to Christianity, and the entire world order shifts. Rome stops executing Christians. Gladiator fights are banned because Christians detest the bloodshed.
Everything changes overnight.
Constantine starts lavishly funding the church, digging up the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, dictating what kind of gold paneling should go on the ceiling. It is a golden age for Western Christians. But let's zero in on the disastrous ripple effect this had outside of Rome's borders.
This is where it gets really dark.
So what does this all mean for the Christians living peacefully in Persia? It was a massive geopolitical blunder. Constantine decides to write a letter to the Persian Shah, Shapur II. He writes, "Hey, the finest provinces of Persia are filled with Christians. I commend these persons to you for your protection." To Constantine, maybe he thinks he is being a good global Christian leader.
Sure, in his mind.
But put yourself in the sandals of the Persian Shah. This doesn't look like a polite request at all. It looks like Rome, your greatest military rival, just claimed ownership of a massive chunk of your domestic population.
Yeah, Constantine essentially turned every single Christian in Persia into a suspected Roman spy.
It's unbelievable.
This raises an important question about the extreme dangers of state-sponsored religion. The moment Constantine claimed to be the protector of all Christians, he inextricably linked the Christian faith with the Roman military apparatus.
They became one and the same to the Persians.
And he didn't just stop at a letter. Rumors spread that Constantine was preparing a massive attack on Persia. He assembled an enormous army. He even had a replica of the biblical tabernacle made to bring with him.
You're kidding. A replica tabernacle.
Yeah. Announcing he was going to launch a punitive attack on Persia and then be baptized in the River Jordan. He was minting coins naming his nephew the ruler of Persia before they even marched.
That's incredibly arrogant.
For the Christians in the East, this looked like salvation. They thought Christ's kingdom on earth was arriving with Roman swords.
But then Constantine unexpectedly gets sick and dies before the invasion even launches. The Roman army stays home.
And that is when the trap snaps shut. Shapur II is sitting there, terrified of this fifth column inside his borders, and he is egged on by the Zoroastrian authorities who have been waiting for an excuse to strike.
Because they finally had proof of treason.
Exactly. He unleashes absolute hell on the Persian Christians. As reprisals for Constantine's aggression, the Persian state thirsted for the blood of the saints. The grim statistics from just one surviving manuscript record the execution of 16 bishops and 50 priests. And look at the charges. The leading bishops were explicitly accused of making the Shah's people rebel and become slaves of the Roman emperor. The Persian Christians were absolutely slaughtered, not because of some theological debate over the nature of the Trinity, but precisely because Rome had embraced them.
Wow. It is such a dark irony. The emperor, who is universally credited with saving Christianity in the West, is the exact same emperor whose arrogance essentially destroyed its future in the East.
The Roman embrace was a death sentence for the Asian church. By adopting the religion, Rome compromised the Eastern Christians completely in the eyes of their Persian rulers.
We have traveled a long way down these ancient roads today. We have seen how Buddhist monks pivoted from solitary meditation to accepting diamonds and lapis lazuli to build the credit networks that fueled global trade. We watched Kushan kings adapt local theology to declare themselves the Son of God, turning tax evasion into blasphemy. We saw Zoroastrian fire temples marching in lockstep with the Persian army, smashing the idols of their rivals to justify endless military expansion.
Yeah.
And finally, we saw Constantine accidentally destroy the thriving Eastern Christian Church by trying to throw the weight of the Roman military behind it.
It's a fascinating, brutal history.
It really is. If there's one ultimate takeaway from this deep dive into the source material, it is that along the ancient Silk Roads, faith was never just a matter of personal peace or quiet meditation.
No, it wasn't.
It was the ultimate currency. It was the currency of power, of politics, of military conquest, and of sheer brutal survival. And I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. Think about how incredibly fragile our current cultural map of the world truly is.
That's a great point.
If Constantine had simply delayed sending that arrogant letter to the Persian Shah, or if he hadn't converted his massive military empire to a religion that was so deeply rooted in the East, well, Christianity might never have been viewed as a fifth-column threat by the Persian Empire.
Right.
The Asian church might have continued to thrive and expand along those trade routes, uninterrupted by state violence. Which means today, the global epicenter of the Christian faith might not be the Vatican and Rome at all.
It could have been anywhere.
It might very well be in Baghdad or Kabul. The next time you picture those ancient caravans of camels, remember, they weren't just carrying silk, they were carrying the blueprints for the modern world. Something for you to ponder until next time.